Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cultivate E.D.H podcast. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Cam, and today we've got deck number 4 in our Commander 2020 review series. Up today, Ruthless Regiment with Jarina Kudrow. 1 and a Mardu, red, white, black for a 3/3 human soldier. When Jarina Kudrow enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token for each time you cast a commander from the command zone this game. Other humans you control get +2/+0. Aaron, tell me about Jarina Kudrow.
So, when I first saw this card, I was really intrigued because once we saw that we were getting partner commanders, it makes that text, the wording on it, really interesting because it says when she enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 human soldier token for each time you've cast a commander from the command zone this game. So, you know, you could, in theory, try and cast her over and over again, but that can get pretty taxing on a Mardu mana base. But if you look, we've got the two partner commanders. You have twice as many commanders. You're going to be getting twice as many triggers if you make those two your commander and put Jarina Kudrow in the 99.
I really think that Jarina Kudrow lends herself to being one of the commanders that really it's a 50-50 split where she can go into 99 and be almost just as effective because she's an anthem on her own. And then obviously she has the text that when you cast her, if you've been playing with the partner commanders as your commanders straight out of the box and you've cast both of them once, well then she's going to enter with 2 1/1 human soldiers. Let's transition over to the two partner commanders so that we can really get a side-by-side comparison and see whether or not we think Jarina belongs in the 99 or in the command zone. So first up, we have Trin, Champion of Freedom, 3 and a white for a 3/3 human soldier, partner with Sylvar, Devourer of the Free. At the beginning of your end step, if you have attacked this turn, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token, and Sylvar, Devourer of the Free, is 3 in Rakdos, black-red, 4/2 Cat Nightmare, partner with Trin, Menace, sacrifice a human, put a +1/+1 counter on Sylvar, Devourer of the Free, it gains indestructible until the end of the turn.
I don't know if these would be better or not as commanders, but I definitely think you get some good value out of both of these cards together. Um, Sylvar is probably going to be your more heavy damage dealer, where Trin is really just going to try to get you those 1/1 tokens and use her more as utility for after Sylvar attacks.
See, now we'll get into this in the rest of the episode where this deck kind of leans, but I think it's notable here that this deck kind of leans almost towards an aristocrat style of play and simultaneously a go wide style of play where you're trying to get tokens and you're trying to like attack with a bunch of tokens and pump them up and make them big. And I think Sylvar and Trin really lend themselves more to the aristocrats aspect because Trin's making the human soldier and then Sylvar's eating it and getting bigger. And then obviously Jarina Kudrow makes the humans. So I think where I'm falling on this split is I think that maybe you want to run Trin, Champion of Freedom, and Sylvar as the commanders right out of the box and put Jarina Kudrow in the 99.
Yeah, because then, once you pull Jarina Kudrow, maybe you've cast Trin and Sylvar a couple of times, and once she comes in, you're going to start really pumping out those tokens and getting a lot of good value from Sylvar and just out of these tokens in general.
It's also really notable from like a curving out aspect where Trin, if you can get Trin down on turn 4 and then Sylvar on turn 5, and then maybe later when you draw Jarina, you have at least 2 commander casts banked for when you finally draw Jarina. And I think that's pretty notable because then you're not just relying on casting Jarina once, which if she's in the command zone nets you 1 human soldier. But if you can curve out with Trin and Sylvar, then she's netting you 2 plus the anthem effect that she gives them.
Yeah, and it may seem like, oh, 1 extra human soldier isn't that much, but in the long run, it's going to get you different value, whether that be, you sacrifice it to Sylvar or to something else that's going to need it. I mean, there's a lot of good aristocrat type things out there, and maybe you kind of lean this deck towards that to really you get the best uses out of sacrificing those tokens.
And I think that's really where the deck is leaning. It's really kind of leaning towards the aristocrat strategy more than the go wide strategy. But those two things kind of go hand in hand because aristocrat decks really want tokens and other bodies to abuse to feed into the engines that allow the aristocrat deck to be what it is. And then our next commander on this list, I don't really think falls into either of those categories. I don't really think he falls into the deck very much at all. We have Kelsian the Plague for Mardu, 3 mana, 2/2, Vigilant Haste. When Kelsian the Plague gets +1/+1 for each experience counter you have, tap, Kelsian deals 1 damage to target creature you don't control. When that creature dies this turn, you get an experience counter. It's really just kind of, it's this like weird pinger type ability where you're almost just kind of try to play Kelsian, just to have the human synergy, and then maybe you can tap him, deal 1 damage or something, have the 1 damage marked on it, and then kill spell it, and then you get the experience counter and make Kelsian bigger. I just don't really think it's definitely not one of the commanders you're going to run out of the box.
It's funny because, you could, in theory, because it's target creature, you could kind of just feed it one of Jarina's humans. Like, you get the 1/1, you tap Kelsian, and then kill the human and get the experience and start boosting him up. But, like, I don't really know that that's really a worthy use of that human. I mean, you're kind of almost sacrificing it at that point. But
I'd
he's
almost
not.
rather feed it to Sylvar.
Yeah,
Because at least Sylvar is gaining indestructible out of this, and when he's getting bigger, he has the ability once he gets bigger and gains the indestructible to survive combat. Whereas Kelsian might not survive combat. You might put all this work into pumping Kelsian up, and then it's lost on combat because you try to go to combat with Kelsian, and then they just removal spell it.
I mean, one of the like only kind of good uses I see for Kelsian is like, maybe you go through combat and they've got something that is kind of low. If you after your creatures fight, maybe there's something that they've blocked with that has 1 toughness left. You can put Kelsian in, then tap him and deal the damage because he's got haste. But I don't even know if that's worth it, honestly. Like,
Seems kind of corner case.
yeah,
But even then, I think
exactly.
you have a good point where it's like you might just be playing Kelsian in this deck, like post upgrades after you've opened the box, played it a couple times out of the box. You might be just keeping Kelsian in here because he's a good way to get creatures to die, which is kind of what this deck wants to go if you start leaning into the aristocraty type archetype.
Yeah, but definitely between Trin and Silvar and Jarina, I think those are what you're gonna see commanding this deck from the get go. I don't see Kelsian really finding a place as a commander for this particular deck.
And our next card on the list really, really synergizes with Trin and Jarina in the command zone because it's General's Enforcer for white and a black. You get a 2/3 human soldier. Legendary humans you control have indestructible. 2 white black, exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. I think this card's awesome in this deck.
Oh, absolutely. This card is really just wanting. I mean, it really wants Jarina to be the commander a little bit more than Trin, because obviously Trin comes with Silvar, who is not a human. But either way, because Silvar you can actually give indestructible by sacrificing something. So you give Trin indestructible, you only have to worry about Silvar every so often. You just have to sacrifice something to make both of your commanders indestructible. That's some really good value,
And
just
this
all
card
around.
kind of like rides the line between what we were talking about just a minute ago, where the let's go wide or let's lean into the aristocrat, because the indestructibility leans itself to the let's go wide, let's get in there, let's attack, let's deal damage. And then the aristocraty side is you're exiling things out of other people's graveyards, preventing them from getting that value, and then you're netting a small creature to then be abused by other creatures out of the deal.
Yeah, it's really funny because it just goes to show you that when Wizards was making this deck, they're like, you know what? We're gonna make it really easy for people to send this in whichever direction they feel like sending it.
I think this card, even though it's in the Ikoria main set and just basically being peeled over from there into this deck, I still think it's a really, really smart inclusion to not just make the players go and buy Ikoria booster packs or maybe just waste the 25 cents that this card is going to cost to buy the single, and just like you're just getting that value in the deck anyway, and I think that's really good. And speaking of value, we'll move on to our next card, Virg Rangers. 2 and a white for a 3/3 human scout, first strike. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. As long as an opponent controls more lands than you may play lands from the top of your library. This card is a must include in all Boros decks moving forward.
Absolutely. And it's funny, this is exactly what we were talking about the other day. We were talking about if we're going to see ramp in white, it's going to have the clause of as long as an opponent controls more lands than you. And here that is again with Verge Rangers.
And the thing is that because green is such a prevalent part of Commander, it's probably one of the best colors, one, two, whichever place you want to put it in. The green deck is almost always going to have more lands than you because they have the ability to get ramp spells. There are even like other color combinations that can ramp harder than Boros can, and I just think that Verge Rangers and other cards like it, like we talked about Cartographer's Hawk a couple of decks ago, these are the future of white ramp.
Yeah, this is what we're going to need to start getting Boros the help that it needs to be a little more competitive.
I'm really excited to see Verge Rangers as a card because it really is gonna help shore up the gap that we see between mono white and Boros and the rest of the color pairs. It's not gonna carry the entire weight on its back, but it's at least a start. And if this is where we have to start, then this is where the starting point is.
Yeah, and because I will say for Verge Rangers, it's not ramp. It because it does say it has a text on the bottom that says you can play a land this way only if you have an available land play remaining. So it's not netting you extra lands in a turn, but it is getting you caught up with, maybe people are ramping and maybe you just don't have that land in hand, but there is one on the top. So instead of waiting to draw it, you're able to play it from the top.
Well, it's essentially like an eighth card in your hand. If you have 7 cards in your hand, this is essentially the eighth. So if you have a hand of 7 cards and no lands, you've already played 3 of them and you've drawn 3 cards since the beginning of the game, you're back up to 7 and you still haven't played another land. You get basically every time you're getting to look at that 8th card and say, okay, sweet, I'm playing a land off the top. And it's like, all right, now I'm getting back in there. I'm not missing my land drops. I'm really hammering home the fact that like I'm not going to get left behind this time.
Yeah, and that's what this card wants to do. It really just wants to keep it's going to keep you from being behind in land drops.
Alrighty then, up next we got Fireflux Squad, 3 in a red, human soldier, 4/3 with haste. Whenever Fireflux Squad attacks, you may exile another target attacking creature you control. If you do, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped and attacking, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Not in any order, a random order. Super unique card.
Yeah, it's really cool, and it really does lean back towards that aristocrat strategy again. You swing in with a 4/3, maybe you swing in with a little 1/1, and then you exile that 1/1 and try to find something a little bit bigger, which is that's good value for a Mardu aristocrats.
It's really interesting in the sense that yeah, it leans towards the aristocrat strategy. This is another card that really rides that line where, yeah, I want to make a bunch of little 1/1s because then as I'm attacking with my Fireflux squad and just say a 1/1 token, I can pitch that token to maybe go rip something off the top of my deck that might be better. And even then, it leans itself towards the going wide strategy because you want to get Fireflux squad and obviously some tokens so you can pitch the token and then find something even better to go wide and hit harder.
Yeah, definitely. I really like the uniqueness of this card and the ability to send it in either direction, which again, it's really interesting seeing Wizards make a deck where it's focused, yet you can send it in any direction that you want to go with it.
I feel like
And
we've seen a ton of these cards recently. Don't you feel like don't you kind of feel the same way where it's like we had Perforos in the last set where you can sneak attack something in, and then we had Ilarg last spring with War of the Spark where like you're getting all of these sneak attack effects.
yeah, I mean, who doesn't like to bring in creatures for free? I mean, I know I do. That'll take us to our next card, though. Frontier Warmonger. 3 in a red for a human warrior, 4/4. Whenever one or more creatures attack one of your opponents or a planeswalker they control, those creatures gain menace until end of turn.
Seems good.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely wanting to go wide, giving all those creatures menace, making it hard for them to be blocked. Always always good to get evasion on your creatures.
It seems really good, like out of the box, and this one is one of those that doesn't ride the line. It's just this is all for going wide. Let's hit with as many creatures as we can and deal a bunch of damage. That's really where this card shines. It's definitely not on the aristocrat side of the line.
Yeah, although we do have one that kind of looks more towards the aristocrat. That's species specialist for 2 black black, a human warrior. As species specialist enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever a creature of the chosen type dies, you may draw a card.
Oh,
I
this
think
card is so good. This card is so good. Uh,
we're absolutely going to be seeing this in tribal in any tribal deck from here on out that's in black. I mean, being able to draw extra cards as you're losing creatures is great. And you turn this more towards aristocrat, you're going to be drawing the heck out of some cards. Like just
the one really big downside is that like it's so rooted in a tribal based strategy, except if it's not a human based tribal strategy, you might be losing out on the other synergies that like your tribe could present. And just as an example, like Edgar Markov and vampires, this doesn't when I play species specialist, I can name vampire, and then whenever my vampires die, I get to draw a card, but I'm not getting the value on turn 4 of playing species specialist and then getting a 1/1 token.
yeah,
But I still think that the drawing a card is it's so close to offsetting that I almost think it's worth it.
yeah. I mean, I think in all kind of tribal decks, every so often you get one or two creature cards that aren't in that tribe, but they still give you that value that you need. This is definitely one of those cards.
I it's just so it's like so narrow in what it does because it really lends itself to that tribal strategy that this card is awesome in this deck because not only is it lending itself to the aristocrat strategy, but it's also letting you draw cards in Mardu, which in Mardu we're really relying on the black aspect of Mardu for the card draw. This card is just awesome in this deck, straight out of the box, because hopefully you're making the tokens off of Jarina Kudrow or off of General's Enforcer, and you're either pitching them to your Fireflux squad, and then it's dying. Oh, well, actually, no, but Fireflux squad doesn't work because it exiles it. But there are other ways. It's a Mardu deck that kind of leans in the aristocrat manner. You might sacrifice it to Sylvar instead. You get that draw trigger. Just really solid card out of the box and moving forward for the Jarina Kudrow deck if that's where you're going with it, is if you're going to build this deck post playing it out of the box.
Yeah, and up next we've got Titan Hunter, 4 and a black human warrior. At the beginning of each player's end step, if no creatures died this turn, Titan Hunter deals 4 damage to that player. And for 1 and a black, sacrifice a creature, you gain 4 life.
So we have the probably second or third sacrifice outlet of the deck where you pay mana and you sacrifice, you gain 4 life. So you're getting those death triggers that obviously your species specialist wants. It's just that I feel like that first line of text really kind of maybe hinders the Titan Hunter a little bit, and I only mean that in such a nominal sense that you're still going to deal 4 damage to something, and that's not nothing. But if you're taking this deck and leaning towards the aristocrat side of it more, at the beginning of each player's end step, yes, it's easier that maybe some of the other decks didn't have stuff that dies, so you're going to get to ping them for 4. But you're almost probably never going to get to do that on your turn. You're going to be heavily relying on stuff that your opponents aren't going to combat and not getting their creatures killed or something like that to really hammer home the 4 damage to that player.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because it obviously promotes action from the other players because they're not going to be taking 4 damage every turn, and they'll start destroying other people's creatures, which will then probably provoke those players, and it's kind of an interesting card that starts to sort of pit people against one another or against you because you played the Titan Hunter, I guess, but still, an interesting card nonetheless.
I think it's still super good just because it has the sacrifice outlet stapled to it, which is something that all aristocrats decks want a ton of those effects just for redundancy so that you're almost never without a sacrifice outlet. It would be better if it's free, but if it was free, you would just gain a bunch of life, so obviously they have to put it behind a mana restriction. But a sacrifice outlet is a sacrifice outlet.
Yeah, and I think that overall, because I believe that's the last new creature we're going to be looking at for now. I still have really enjoyed some of the new creatures that we're getting out of these decks. Really, really good stuff. But up next we've got Dire Tactics. Uh, a white and a black instant exile target creature. If you don't control a human, you lose life equal to that creature's toughness. Really unique card that I think goes extremely well into this deck. 2 mana to exile a creature, and I mean, if you don't have a human out when you go to play Dire Tactics, A, it probably won't be the end of the world, but B, I think that 9 times out of 10 you will, and that second clause isn't really going to take effect. Because even if you play Jarina Kudrow and you get that human, even if someone kills Jarina Kudrow, you still get that 1/1 white human. And that is, I mean, you're not going to be playing Dire Tactics right out of the gate on turn 2. So you will be waiting, and you'll should be having creatures out at that point in time.
So Dire Tactics is like this weird path to exile mutation. Mutate. I didn't plan that, but that's funny. Where instead of so you get to exile a creature, but then instead of the other player gaining life, you're losing the life. Which it's this weird like ebb and flow where it's like, oh man, 2 mana exile a creature, that's really good. But man, if they have like a big Eldrazi or something and it's almost worth it to let it live and just hit you than do you play Dire Tactics, exile it, and then you're just gonna lose the life anyway. They might not get the Annihilator trigger on their Eldrazi in this example, which is all the better for you, but it's like they basically got that free hit on you anyway. If we ignore the you control a human clause.
Yeah, I feel like the only time I don't think you would use this as like an agreement if maybe someone does have like a big Eldrazi or something, and they say, oh, if you guys can if someone else can take care of this, I can let you guys draw cards or something like that, whatever the agreement is. You almost don't want to use Dire Tactics unless they are going to swing at you, and maybe there's that Annihilator trigger that you don't want to get. But it really could hurt you if you're just trying to help someone else, because then they're not taking damage and you're taking it. Could be 10 or 11 damage, whatever big creature is swinging at people. But
I think
you
the
know it,
bottom of the line here is that you really shouldn't be playing Dire Tactics unless you have humans in your deck and you have enough of them that Dire Tactics is almost always just going to be a straight exile spell because you really don't want to be in the late game and be like holding this up all game. You've had Dire Tactics in your hand since the beginning, and you're just waiting for a good chance to use it. And then maybe somebody board wipes, and then they pass the turn to the next player, and that player immediately rebuilds with a spell that returns all the creatures that they got destroyed from their graveyard back to the battlefield. And then you're like, oh, well, now's the time to use dire tactics, but I don't have any humans. Is it worth the risk of losing all this life to potentially just to get rid of one thing when you could be losing upwards of 6, 7, 8, and upwards of that much life as a trade off for it. Whereas you would almost rather just play Path to Exile, which is a lot safer. Give your opponent some life and just do your best to protect you.
Yeah, I mean, because in the long run, what's worse, giving your opponents a land, or giving them some life if you use Swords to Plowshares, or you taking a bunch of damage? I think the obvious answer is either giving them life or land, because that's something that is generally easier to take care of, in my opinion, than you taking 10, 11 damage, however much it is. But I think with that, we'll move on to the next card, Call the Coppercoats. For 2 and a white, Strive. This spell costs 1 and a white more to cast for each target beyond the first. Choose any number of target opponents. Create X 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of creatures those opponents control. This card's
I'm not really
great.
a fan of the strive mechanic because it's really mana intensive. You have to pay 2 more mana for each target beyond the first, but you're getting these 1/1 human soldier tokens.
I mean, it's
Mm.
definitely what this deck wants to do, because, and maybe you don't even want to target everyone at the table. You Maybe you're up against 3 different decks. Someone's playing mono blue control deck, and then we've got someone playing big creatures and like maybe in Gruul or something like that, and someone else is playing tokens. Well, all you really need to do it, whoever has the most creatures, or if they have, I think it's only worth it to play this card and to pay the extra 2 if they have like 3 or more creatures out.
So you think that's the threshold? Is that like this card is really only going to be worth it to you if you have an opponent that has 3+ creatures?
Yeah, because I'm not gonna pay 3 mana to create 2/1/1
Two 1/1s, yeah.
humans. Yeah,
When you could get that effect from a card as simple as Raise the Alarm, which is just a
yeah,
2 mana create 2 1/1s.
exactly. Like I'm not gonna waste this on like only a couple of humans, unless someone has an army of like saplings or something like that, and I can pay 3 mana, target them, and create 10, 11 1/1 humans.
I think this
You know,
card is meta dependent because if you have like a token deck or a big creature deck that wants to get a lot of creatures onto the battlefield or something along those 2 lines, where you're almost assuredly maybe if you're playing Jarina Kudro all night and then maybe your opponents are switching up their decks, you want to reliably every time you cast Call of the Coppercoats, you really want to be taking advantage of the fact that there's the token player sitting across from me, there's the big creature deck sitting across from me, and that obviously that affects the time in the game you're going to cast this because maybe the token player gets 5 tokens out by turn 4, let's say, and then you can reliably on the next turn play Call of the Coppercoats, and then now you've got 4/1/1 humans, and that's not a bad deal. All in all, I think Call of the Coppercoats is about a B. I think that in the late game, when you can afford to pay the strive cost and you're going to get even more value, even in the example, Aaron, that you laid out, maybe the mono blue control player has 2 or 3 creatures out, you still might even just want to target them just to get the value. It's a solid card, but it also has its downsides.
yeah, I think it's definitely one of those cards where it's gonna most likely get better as the game's going on and people are kind of ramping up their boards. But in the early game, it is it's a 3 mana card. Unless you're gonna play this Strive then you're gonna get a little bit more. But until people are ramping up, it doesn't give you as much value, but it gives you, more value as the game goes on, which is nice.
This card really shines in the late game, is basically the point. Really shines in the late game. Early to middle game, it really depends on the scenario that you're in.
Yeah, that'll move us to our free commanders spell that we've been touching on them every single time they come up in these decks. This new one's called Flawless Maneuver. It's an instant for 2 and a white. If you control a commander, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn.
Seems good.
Yeah, solid card. I mean, whether it be a board wipe coming down or you are you're being chump blocked or something like that, but you need to keep your board up, whatever the scenario may be, giving the creatures you control indestructible till end of turn, always a solid play. And you might even be able to do it for free.
Yeah, I mean it's really good in combat, in and out of combat. In combat, blockers, attackers, whatever it may be, you got a bunch of creatures coming at you, and you want to keep up your board. You're swinging in because you're going for the go wide strategy, and you don't want to lose the momentum that you built up. So you cast flawless maneuver for free, and then obviously pre board wipe as they cast it, you cast flawless maneuver, and it's like, okay, now I'm still standing.
Yeah, definitely. From all these different free commander spells that we've seen so far, I've really liked every single one of them that we've seen, and this is just going to add to that, just another solid card.
All right, speaking of solid cards, up next, Sanctuary Blade. 2 mana for an artifact equipment. As Sanctuary Blade becomes attached to a creature, choose a color. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has protection from the last chosen color. It's a really good way to protect your commander.
Yeah, and I really like the clause of when it becomes attached to a creature, you choose a color. A lot of times it's something enters the battlefield and you choose the whatever it is asking you to choose. But this is whenever it becomes attached, it's a little bit different. Maybe you send it over to your commander, choose a color, but oh, that creature that you were worried about earlier died, so now there's a different threat on the board. You can attach it to something else, choose a different color, and you just kind of move it around and continue to choose different colors as the need arises.
And protection is just such a solid mechanic that it works in all senses. That this is going to stop all white removal spells. This is going to stop all black removal spells from coming at your or at your commander, which is more than likely what you're putting this on. If Drina Kudro's your commander, this is really good because it's going to protect her. It's going to give her the buff that she can't give to because she says other humans you control. She's going to get the +2/+0 now. And if you're in a meta that's super like 1-for-1 removal spells where I'm gonna path to exile your commander as soon as your commander goes to attack. It's like, well, I'm gonna play the Sanctuary Blade, equip it, and now my Jirina Kudro has protection from white.
Yeah, I mean, definitely really good. Giving your commander some more staying power of being able to last a little bit longer. It's it's just like boots or greaves. Something that you're gonna want to put on your commander just to keep them out there doing what they need to do.
All right,
I
this
don't even know that I'd honestly put it on Jirina Kudro if you had her as your commander because you want her to die so you can bring her back to the battlefield. I feel like it would be a little bit better on like
well, you
Sylvar.
wanna do that, but at the same time, she's also the anthem for all your creatures if you're in the
True.
position to go wide. So I mean, like it's a double sided coin. Like
Yeah,
you
definitely
want to
situational.
protect her because she's the anthem for all of your little creatures, but then also you kind of want to get more little creatures if you're behind or something. If you're trying to build back up and you're just in such a hole that the only way for you to dig yourself out is to find a way to sacrifice or kill Jarina and then cast her from the command zone, which is a really deep hole to be in. But if that's
Yeah.
the case, then that's the case.
I mean, and maybe you can blink her and get those enter the battlefields without having to get her killed. But yeah, definitely, it's just something to think about.
All right, the next card on our list, I'm super excited for outside of this deck because I love aristocrats, and this is just another effect that I really want in my aristocrats deck. It's Bastion of Remembrance, 2 and a black enchantment. When Bastion of Remembrance enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So it is a blood artist effect on an enchantment that brings its own lunch.
Yeah, I mean, this is what Aristocrats wants to be doing, and having it on an enchantment makes your life a little bit easier because a lot of times it's pretty easy to kill a blood artist with just a simple removal spell, a bolt, whatever it may be. But with Bastion of Remembrance, I mean, there's definitely more creature removal than there is enchantment removal, so you'll be keeping it around for a good chunk longer than any of your other uh, aristocrat type creatures.
So it seems to be that in this new age of Magic, whenever we're getting our blood artist effects, we're gonna pay more for them, if only nominally by 1 mana, but it's either harder to remove or it comes with something that you want. And Bastion of Remembrance comes with the fodder, the 1/1 white human soldier creature token that you can then find a way to kill in whatever way, and then get that uh, the death trigger on the Bastion so that when it dies, they lose 1, you gain 1, and then obviously you want to keep up that momentum.
Yeah, a solid card all around. I think that it's definitely going to be seen in all the aristocrats decks, and people are just going to want to be using it to their utmost advantage of, making it hard to remove blood artist.
All right, up next we got 2 red enchantment, Molten Echoes. As Molten Echoes enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever a non-token creature of the chosen type enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Token gains haste, exile at the beginning of the next end step. So it's one of the like I guess we can call these echo effects where you're getting a creature for a turn and then it goes away at the end step, but maybe it has a really powerful effect and you're getting that effect for that 1 turn and that's all you need to close out the game.
Yeah, I always really like cards like this, being able to kind of copy creatures for a turn and deal that little bit of extra damage or get that extra effect that you need to help you close out the game. And it's not, super mana intensive. It's only 2 and 2 red, so you're gonna be able to uh, you're gonna be able to do this pretty easily and be able to get good value off of it starting early in the game. I know that I'm probably gonna put this in my dragon deck and just anytime I send down a dragon, I'm gonna get an extra one and put in some extra damage. Always, always good to put in some extra damage with dragons.
See, my main problem with this card within the deck straight out of the box is that humans in and of themselves, you when you're leaning towards the go wide strategy, this card this I feel like this card mainly takes advantage of bigger creatures, like you said in dragons, where you might put into play this big dragon and then swing in for a bunch of damage. Whereas like human tribal really lends itself to the aristocrat strategy, and yeah, you might put in a blood artist, or a blood artist like effect that's a human, off the Molten Echoes, and you might get 2 copies of it, and then you have 2 of them until the end of the turn. I just don't know how much Molten Echoes really lends itself to the human tribal archetype, because humans are so value based and not necessarily like, I'm going to build up this one creature and then I'm going to swing in for a bunch of damage. It's more of like, well, I'm going to play this creature that pumps all my other creatures, and then I'm going to play this other creature that says when my creatures die, I'm going to deal you damage, or something in that spectrum. And I don't know if Molten Echoes really lends itself to that archetype, really.
Yeah, it definitely isn't the best for humans, and I think that you can get some value out of it with different cards in here, but there are definitely better tribes that could see better use out of this card.
Yeah, like
But
dragons or something. Like, I think dragons
yeah,
is a really good example of this card could go in a dragon tribal deck, and it would be really, really good, because you're making a copy of a really big creature that is going to have some big splashy effect, or it's just really big and is going to get in there and deal somebody damage.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't know if Molten Echoes really lends itself to the more value-based archetypes like aristocrats and like maybe human tribal and go wide stuff.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be one of those cards that you're probably going to take out of here and get something that has a little more synergy with the deck. But out of the box, not terrible. And I think that is going to move us to our reprint section. So the first one on here, Knight of the White Orchid. It's 2 white, first strike, 2/2 human knight. When Knight of the White Orchid enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you may search your library for a Plains card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. I mean,
Now, this card, we've had this card in Magic since Magic Origins, I believe, is where it was first printed. And this is the kind of like when we were calling for more ramp in white, it was kind of modeled after Knight of the White Orchid, where you're playing a creature early on that is gonna. Now this one actually does ramp you because you actually do get to go get it and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Whereas something like
it actually doesn't
Ver-
enter tapped.
and it doesn't enter tapped either.
Yeah,
Whereas Virg Rangers, you don't you still have to use your land drop to get the card.
yeah. I mean, this is what we want white ramp to look like. Because we know we aren't going to get straight ramp, so it'll always have that clause that if opponent controls more lands than you, but being able to have it enter the battlefield. This one, has it untapped, which is nice, but it doesn't just send it to your hand or anything like that. Like land tax just sends 3 lands to your hand. This actually does ramp you, and this is not this is a really good addition for this deck. Mardu does have a little bit of extra because that black can occasionally help out with some lands, but he's still one of the harder mana bases to ramp out with, and this is going to help you do that.
And even it says planes. Notice how it doesn't say basic planes, it says planes. So this can find shock lands, this can find dual lands, this can find any card that has a planes type in its rules text. And I will take back what I said earlier about the Magic Origins things because I did forget that this card was printed in Shards of Alara first.
Oh yeah,
Completely forgot about it being printed in Shards of Alara. Which even way back then, this card obviously it showcases more of like this card has existed in Magic. This exists. We should be getting more effects like this on a regular basis with our Commander product.
for sure. The next one on here, I've always really liked this card, Alicia, who smiles at death, 2 in a red, first strike. Whenever Alicia, who smiles at death, attacks, you may pay its hybrid Orzhov. If you do, return target creature card with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, tapped and attacking. This is, definitely that go wide strategy that you're gonna see. This, kind of the whichever half you decide to go with. This is one of those cards that really helps that. It does a little bit of both because as you sacrifice things, you can bring them back with Alessia. But if you are sacrificing tokens, obviously tokens don't go to the graveyard, so you can't bring them back with her. But still, maybe you sacrifice one of your other cards. Maybe you sacrifice your Knight of the White Orchid and bring it back with Alessia and get some more ramp. That's a good synergy there. Uh, she's just a really good card for this deck.
You know what I didn't realize first glancing over this deck was that this is kind of like the secret fourth DLC commander that you can actually make Alessia the commander of this deck straight out of the box.
Oh yeah, that's true. She
She has the Orzhov hybrid in the rules text, which makes her Mardu.
Yeah, and honestly, she would not be a bad commander for this deck.
I definitely think she's above Kelsien. I think if you're going to run any commander out of the box, Alessia is above Kelsien,
Yeah,
but
I
below
agree.
the partner Trin and Sylvar.
Yeah, I definitely be fun to experiment with.
Yeah, I mean just good value. I mean most of your humans have power less than 2, so I mean anything that died or maybe you sacrificed for a Blood Artist effect, maybe you sacrificed it to Sylvar, you're obviously going to get that stuff back.
Yeah, that's good value. I mean, and speaking of good value, get some card draw here with Magus of the Wheel. Magus of the Wheel. We love him. We like the wheel effects whenever. Or you can pay 1 and a red to tap, sacrifice Magus of the Wheel. Each player discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. He's a 3/3 human wizard.
Synergizes with Alicia, where you might pitch some human cards that have power 2 or less, and then you can get in there with Alicia and get them back after you've wheeled.
Yeah,
This
solid.
card is weird because it always seems to like creep up there in price because it's Wheel of Fortune, but on a creature.
Yeah, it's a good solid card that it's Wheel of Fortune that you have to wait a turn for, but a lot of times people don't you'll play him and people aren't necessarily all that concerned about him, and you'll get that wheel effect almost every time.
Or maybe if you can flash him in on an end step or something, but that's not within this deck's capabilities. But nonetheless, still a good card. Next up on our list, we have Zathrid Necromancer, 2 and a black, 2/2 human wizard. Whenever Zathrid Necromancer or another human you control dies, put a 2/2 black zombie creature on token onto the battlefield tapped. So it's making use of the dies triggers that you're going to get off of your humans dying. So whenever you pitch a human token, you're going to get a 2/2 black zombie out of it. And it doesn't really synergize with the human tribal aspect of the deck, but it's also not bad to get some value on the way out.
I mean, it's getting you value as you're pitching those humans, and that's just what the aristocrats wants to do when you're pulling it that when you're going that route, and it may not give you more humans to pitch, but it's still giving you zombies, which you can still pitch those to things that aren't
Like to like
things.
Titan Hunter, you can just pitch a
Yeah,
zombie to gain 4 life, stuff like that. Like it doesn't
yeah,
necessarily. It's not bad. It's not ideally what you want because obviously like Jarina Kudrow is not going to pump the zombies, but on this at the same time like a free
yeah,
token's a free token. If a creature you can like a human you control is dying, a token is a token, and you might as well get something on the way out.
yeah. I mean, you can't pitch it to Silvar, but there's still other cards that you can pitch it to. Maybe you put an Ashnod's Altar in this deck. Who knows if you're going that aristocrats route, that'd definitely be a good card to throw in. But who's to say? I think that honestly, it's definitely is a solid card to keep.
Speaking of solid cards, up next we got Disciple of Bolus, 3 in a black for a 2/1 human wizard. When it enters the battlefield, you can sacrifice another creature. You gain X life and you draw X cards where X is the creature's power. Another just solid reprint.
Yeah, I've used this card a couple of times. It's always given me some good value. And the one thing that is makes it a little hard for this deck is a lot of these creatures don't have huge power toughness. So you might not necessarily get a whole lot of cards or a whole lot of life, but maybe if you have Jarina Kudra out, you're gonna get an extra 2 attached to whatever its original power and toughness is.
I think one of the key things to keep in mind with Disciple of Bolus is the fact that there are other cards out there. One of them is actually a reprint in this deck called Ambition's Cost. Same mana cost, draw 3 cards, lose 3 life. I think the threshold for this card being useful is that you're sacrificing a creature with power 3. So that way, it's basically the same thing. You're getting a human out of the deal that could be pumped later or sacrificed later, however you want to interact with the Disciple of Bolus after you've gotten the trigger. But I think the real thing to keep in mind here is that when you're looking for a creature to sacrifice, if you want the average for your mana, paying the 4 mana for the disciple, you want to look for a creature with power 3 or greater to get even on your deal.
We talked about Magus of the Wheel earlier. Now we got another Magus, Magus of the Disc for 2 and 2 white. Magus of the Disc enters the battlefield tapped for 1 and tap. Destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. Just a real quick 1 mana tap board wipe. It's a really good thing he enters tapped, or else 5 mana destroy all the things is definitely could definitely hurt.
Yeah, so it's I really can't pronounce it. It's Nevinreal's Disc. It just Nev's Disc is how almost everybody says it. Nev's Disc on a creature is basically what this is.
Yeah, and
Solid
that's
board
what
wipe.
that's what a lot of the I think almost all of the Maguses are. It's something on a stick,
Yeah.
something on a creature.
Something it's some either old card or some new card that everybody knows and is a popular card that usually just gets transferred over to a creature, and now the creature has that ability.
Yeah. Up next, a very good value human, Adric Master Tactician, 2 a white and a white. First strike, whenever Adric Master Tactician and at least 3 other creatures attack, you choose which creatures block this combat and how those creatures block. I mean, this is, definitely one of those going wide. This definitely leads itself towards that going wide strategy. I mean, it's like we've seen throughout all these cards in this deck. It's each card either kind of seems like it leans itself towards one or the other strategy.
Yeah, I mean we've seen that throughout this entire deck that it seems to me at least that it's split evenly 50-50 down the middle between this go wide strategy or this aristocrat strategy, and you can use either to win. And in that respect, I think it's a super well designed deck that it can really branch out in either of these two ways.
For sure. And we've had a lot of interesting cards that I think if I feel like that if you took it one way, you like almost would want to take some of these cards out and replace them with different things. And overall, it's going to be an interesting kind of 50-50 split when, once you after play this out of the box and you want to say, okay, I'm going to take it towards the aristocrat theme. Well, now you have to kind of go through and take out a lot of these cards because it leans it towards more going wide. And I think
But at
it's
the
it's kind
same
of funny.
time, those cards are very obvious, like Odric, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. They're extremely obvious, and there's also a lot of other cards that you're not going to have to take out because it leans itself so well to the aristocrats theme. This deck has been really well designed to let you have options, and it really helps show newer players what directions to take the deck.
All right, next up on our list, we got Nahiri the Harbinger, 2 white, red for a 4 mana or 4 loyalty planeswalker. She is also 4 mana, but 4 loyalty planeswalker. +2, you get to discard a card. If you do so, draw a card. So it's rummaging. I believe that's called rummaging. Looting is where you draw and discard. -2, exile target enchantment, tapped artifact, or tapped creature. Removal, not bad. -8, search your library for an artifact or creature card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. It gains haste, return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. Solid reprint.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this card it saw a little bit of play like when it first came out and kind of fell off a little bit after that, but definitely not a bad card to reprint. I think that it is gonna I don't know. I don't know that it would 100% stay in this deck, but it has good value out of the box. Being able to discard a card and draw a card is always nice. You pitch something you don't need, hopefully get something that you do, and has solid removal on it. And then if you can get to that ultimate, I honestly think you would look for something that has an ETB trigger because you put it on the battlefield, it gains haste, and you get to do the thing, do whatever it does, and then return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. So, if you get something that has a really good solid ETB, you're gonna get 2 triggers off that, and that's some good value.
I think that this is definitely one of the cards that stays in the deck, but if you're making cuts, I think this is maybe towards the back of the line of cuts because it does draw you a card, it is removal, and there is enough graveyard recursion in this deck, and there's enough graveyard recursion that you could make by taking out other cards that would make Nahiri even better because then you just discard a human that has power 2 or less, and then you can get it back with Alicia. So in that sense, I think that Nahiri, I think it might definitely be one of the cards that you cut, but I think it's definitely towards the back of the line and it also depends on which route you're taking. If you're leaning towards the aristocrat, I definitely think she's towards the back of the line. If you're leaning towards the go wide strategy, she's probably one of the first.
Yeah. And with that, we'll move to our next card. I don't think this card's gonna come out either way. Is Terminate for a black and a red. Destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. It's an instant. I mean, it just solid removal. I like when seeing wizards just print really good removal because it not only does it show people what good removal is. Some of those new players may not know that much of like what is good. They might just think, oh, removal's removal, but this is solid removal, and this is going to be one of those cards that no matter which way you turn the deck, you'll keep this in there for sure.
Exactly, and this card creeps up in price too. I mean, it's a 2 mana removal spell. It's modern legal. It sees play in modern sometimes, and it just creeps up there in price because it's a solid card that everybody wants. Commander players want it, modern players want it, and I'm assuming there's other players that want it too. I'm not sure. I don't believe it's Pioneer legal, but I definitely know that it is modern and Commander legal, and for that reason, it's just a solid reprint. It gets in every red black deck. Now, the next card on our list is one of my, it's at least in my top 10, if not my top 5. It's Skull Clamp. So for 1 mana, you have an equip cost of 1. Equipped creature gets +1/-1. Whenever the equipped creature dies, you get to draw 2 cards.
This is definitely leaning you towards the aristocrat strategy. You make a 1/1, uh, get the equip cost for 1, and draw 2 cards. I mean, this is easily. I mean, I think you keep it either way, honestly, because drawing 2 cards is always good.
It's just so good. Like I was about to like refute that I think it stays in the deck either way because even in the go wide strategy, you're still making a bunch of 1/1 dorks, and having Skull Clamp is just like I don't know, maybe you swing in and then you've got a bunch of tapped 1/1s. It's like, well, maybe if I'm looking at the cards in my hand, maybe next turn I can replace them. So I'm just going to clamp one and then clamp another one. I get to draw 4 cards. I mean, that's just nuts in a Mardu deck.
Yeah, absolutely. Drawing that many cards that quickly is really going to be something that is kind of getting you that gas towards the end of the game. You you expend a lot of the spells in your hand, a lot of the creatures, whatever, and maybe stuff's going in the graveyard, and you don't have a lot of recursion. Well, you clamp 2 things, boom, 4 cards into your hand, and you have gotten that gas to hopefully close out the game.
And yet again, another card that creeps up there in price because it's just so darn efficient.
Yeah,
Now,
I mean,
speaking of cards that creep up there in value, I remember a point where this next card was like $22. I don't necessarily think it's a $22 card, mainly just because I think it could have been reprinted in several places. It's Shared Animosity, 2 in a red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +1/+0 until the end of the turn for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type with it.
definitely, this is going to be doing what this deck wants to do, no matter which way you're looking at it. I mean, being able to get that kind of tribal boost and get just a lot of extra damage coming in as if you turn a small army of humans sideways, you're going to get a lot of good value with this card. It's just a solid reprint all around.
See, I don't think that this card goes into the aristocrat shell of this deck. It's definitely a go wide because it's conditional on the attack. And obviously, if you're taking this deck out of the box and then shifting it to a go wide strategy more so than the 50-50 split it already is, Shared Animosity is just great for this deck because I mean, if you swing in with 5 humans, they all get +5/+0. I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely could see it being taken out of, if you go to the aristocrats route, but I do think that there is kind of a world where maybe you are kind of I think it's a little bit dependent on your meta. If you're playing against a lot of people who don't really keep huge boards up all the time, and that they are just really just doing a little bit more of a spell slinger type deal, even if you're not pitching all your creatures in a turn, if and you have 2, 3, 4 humans, being able to turn them sideways and just deal a little bit of extra damage every turn doesn't hurt your game at all. It just does sort of depend on your meta a little bit. I could definitely see it going either way.
It is kind of a meta dependent thing, and I do agree with you in that sense. Now, let's move to the next little section we have here, which is our land reprints. We'll just briefly touch on a couple. We've got Battlefield Forge, which is the Boros Pain land, where it taps for colorless or you tap it for either Boros color. Deals 1 damage to you. Shadow Blood Ridge, which is our Signet land, and then Smoldering Marsh, which is our Battle for Zendikar. You have to have 2 basic lands for it to enter untapped. Just yet again, another solid example of why these mana bases are probably some of the best mana bases that we've seen in recent memory in a Commander product. It's just
Yeah.
they're phenomenal.
And they even brought in tribal land with unclaimed territory. When it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. It can tap for a colorless or tap, add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast a creature spell of the chosen type. That they knew that this was going to be tribal themed, and they threw in a tribal land in there. And if people want to go build tribal decks after they play human tribal and they're like, man, maybe I can build some other kind of tribal. Well, this is going to be something that helps you along in building new decks. Just another solid
A
land
really
reprint.
thoughtful inclusion, though, because this is basically the only tribal based deck out of all of them
Yeah,
that they would include unclaimed territory, which, who knows? If they wouldn't have put it in here, it might have spiked in price.
yeah, absolutely. It's a solid card, and you see it played in a lot of different areas. So I agree with you there. And I just think that Wizards has been really thoughtful and just done a really good job with the mana base for all these decks.
I really can't knock them for. I mean, these mana bases aren't what maybe up to the A quality that we would like to see, but this is so darn close. This is so much better than just, you know, Guildgate mana base where it's like, oh, I've got this uh Golgari Guildgate, but it enters tapped. I don't get to cycle it for anything. I don't even have the chance. Like it's just that's not as good as some of the other stuff that they could be doing, like what they've been doing here, where they put in the Ravnica bounce lands. That's what they're called, bounce lands, where you have to return a land, but it taps for 2 colors. I mean that's infinitely better than a guild gate.
Yeah, and they even in some of these decks, and this one included, they have the hideaway lands, and the hideaway lands are really good value and can be helpful in a lot of different situations. So just a really good, you know, really good mana base.
All right, let's move on to our top 3 additions to this deck right out of the box, offhand, or however if these are cards are in your collection, wherever you're getting them from. Aaron, I'll let you go first this time because I've gone first every other time.
So the first one I have on here is Door of Destinies. This is really gonna bring you to that tribal go wide that you'll see this deck kind of turn into. And basically, all it does is when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and whenever a creature of the chosen type enters the battlefield, put a charge counter on Door of Destinies, and that creature type, any creature of the chosen type gets a +1/+1 counter on it gets a +1/+1 for each charge counter on Door of Destinies. So, you're playing a bunch of creatures, getting ready to go wide, and every time you play one, if it's you'll obviously choose human here, and every time you play a human, it keeps getting more charge counters, and you're just able to not only go wide but deal a lot of damage in addition to that. The next one I have on here is Sun Titan. It was actually in one of the other decks, and after seeing this deck, I kind of thought that it was silly that they didn't include it in this deck either. It's infinitely better in this deck. It was in the cycle deck, I think.
It
And
was in the Timeless Wisdom cycling deck.
yeah, it's infinitely better in this deck. And there's so many more targets. It was just kind of funny that they didn't include it in this one as well because it was already getting a reprint. The last one on here is actually one of our new cards that we're getting in our Ikoria. It's Ruinous Ultimatum. And it is the Mardu Ultimatum. And when you play it, it's a sorcery, and it destroys all opponents' um, artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. Or actually, I think it's all non-land permanents.
It is.
So
I do believe it is all
yeah,
non-land permanents you do not control.
yeah, all all opponents non-land permanents, and that is just some a solid board wipe. And not only do you not get hit by it, but it also takes out all non-land permanents. Just a great card. I really like the ultimatum cycle that, and we will get to that when we talk about our Ikoria set review. Cameron, what is your pick 3?
All right, my 3 are Mentor of the Meek, Judith the Scourge Diva, and Angel of Glory Rise. So we'll start with Mentor of the Meek, 2 and a white for a 2/2. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1. If you do, draw a card. It's just really good card draw for decks like this that have a bunch of low power creatures with power 2 or less. Judith the Scourge Diva, 1 black red for a 2/2. Other creatures you control get +1/+0, so it's kind of like the Drina Kudro thing. It's an anthem for all your other creatures. And then when a non-token creature you control dies, Judith the Scourge Diva deals 1 damage to any target. So it's kind of it's leaning more into the aristocrat side of things. It pings things and it helps you either maybe kill stuff or just ping your opponent for 1 whenever you got stuff dying. And then Angel of Glory's Rise, 5 white for a 4/6 Angel. I know it's not a human, but hear me out. Flying. When Angel of Glory's Rise enters the battlefield, exile all zombies, then return all human creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. And this card is for like your post board wipe. Your opponent plays a board wipe. Let's say, Aaron, I'm playing against you, and you Ruinous Ultimatum me. It's like, oh, there go all my creatures. But then I draw Angel of Glory's Rise off the top. Like, awesome. I get all of my humans back. You're really not playing the Angel of Glory's Rise for the... I don't know, maybe there's a zombie tribal deck in your meta, so maybe you're getting that bonus effect, but it's more the, I'm getting all my humans back. It's like a post-board wipe card that really, really shines in this deck.
Yeah, definitely solid additions all around. Now, we always do our give it a grade here. Now, with our give it a grade, Cameron, I'm curious, which direction would you take this deck if you were to pick it up and edit it?
So I think right out of the box, since it's so evenly split, 50-50 aristocrat and then 50 go wide, deal a bunch of damage. I think if me personally, I'm taking it out of the box that I'm going aristocrat, but that's just how I like to play. I like to play aristocrat strategies. So that's where I'm taking it straight out of the box. But I think that this is one of the better designed precons of the set of 5. There's a lot of synergy. It could go in either direction after you've opened the box and played a couple games with it. It can go in the go wide strategy or it can go in the aristocrat direction. And I just feel like there are no matter which way it goes, you're gonna have a solid deck, and you don't really have to make that many additions that are that expensive if you don't want to. So I think overall, I'm gonna give this an A.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on both fronts, actually. I would probably take this aristocrats. Normally, I would want to just send it with the go wide, but I really think that this could have a really solid aristocrats theme that would be a lot of fun to play. So I would send it that way, and I agree with the A that you gave it as well. A solid deck all around. I mean, again, the lands are great. The reprints are extremely solid, and the synergy is exactly what we wanted to see. So another great deck, and I can't wait to see the last one that we'll have.
All right, I think that's our show for this episode, guys. Let us know, what do you think that we missed? Do you think that we should add some other things other than what we listed for our pick 3 includes? What do you think of the deck overall? Let us know on Twitter. Come join our Discord. Talk to us about the decks. What you think, all of your opinions and all that. We're going to put a link in the description below. And we'll see you guys next time for the very last deck in the Commander 2020 review series.